Thanks, Fernanda. Hi, everyone. Sorry, we were still trying to get our heads around the screen sharing when we started that. So I am going to attempt this again. Let me see if I can get this right. Can you see that, Fernanda? Or can you see my Slack?
No,
Can.
all is good. We see
Okay.
you.
And if I do that, is that still okay?
Yep,
Okay,
working.
perfect. Okay, so yeah, as Fernanda said, we want to save as much time for questions as possible, but this is just a really quick overview, and then Jen's got a couple of slides to prepare. So um, yeah, most of this stuff is on the website, but it's always useful to talk through it and hear from us. So this is the third cohort. So the very first cohort started in 2023, and that was really about establishing it with like a balance of different regions and topics. So we had different levels of experience. With the second cohort, we decided that we wanted to go for much bigger outlets to really raise the profile of the network. And that's been really successful, but it's also resulted in record number of applications as well. So it kind of makes it harder for us when there's more great applications from all of you. Um, this time, I think we're going to go for a bit of a balance. We have certain targets that we have to meet within the Pulitzer Center's Ocean Reporting Network. One of them is that we have to have 60% of our journalists from the Global South. So we really need to focus on that balance of projects. Often it's really tricky when we have, five great applications from Europe and we can only really take one. So any cohort kind of really depends on what topics are in the mix, which journalists, which kind of outlets. This time, there are two spots that we're keeping for transparency and governance. So this is a kind of project that's shared between ocean and rainforest reporting networks. But luckily ocean fits into it really nicely. So Jenn's project, which she will talk about later, was a good example of this. So things that really focus on supply chains, following the money. I think we talk about a bit more about that in the application form. And also, as ever, we're always looking for cross-border collaborations. We've had a couple in the last cohorts that have worked really well, but really, really want to see teams of journalists teaming up to tell stories from different parts of the world. So that's the kind of approach we're going for this year. There's lots of benefits to being part of this network. So number one is in this climate that you get a whole year of salary for this. You also get a pretty generous pot of reporting expenses, and that's used for your field reporting, for consultants. If you're working with a small newsroom and they don't have the resources to do like data visualizations, we can also help you with that. But the money has to go to support the journalism only. Training, this works differently for every cohort. So at the start, our data and research team will send out a survey, and we really like to get a measure of what skills we think people are looking to improve on or what areas of expertise they're looking to build up. There will be a mix of core stuff, so technical skills like we work with Global Fishing Watch, we work a lot with satellite imagery, data visualization, and digital tools that are using kind of corporate and follow the money research. But in the last two cohorts, we've also incorporated a lot of other really useful stuff. We've done public speaking courses, we've done mental health and well-being, because we know how hard it is to be a freelancer or work in isolation remotely. So we sort of take it a bit of what you're looking for in terms of your training and growth, but also what we think will be useful for capacity building. You get to work with our fantastic data and research team, which will give you access to all these amazing databases and platforms that you usually have to pay a lot of money for, which Fernanda is a part of that team. And they will really help you learn a lot of new skills, think about your project in a different way, and sharpen any existing skills that you've got. And throughout your project, you'll be talking to them about developing methodologies, which will be shared and published online, toolkits or databases for reporting on certain topics so that we can kind of share as much as possible with the journalism community and build capacity. Being part of the network is probably the most important thing, and that's really hard to kind of put a finger on and quantify, but it's just about everybody learning from each other's skills and perspectives and experiences. We have a lot of different levels of expertise coming in. In the last cohort, we had a very senior journalist who learned a lot from the younger data-driven journalists, and they in turn learned from his amazing kind of career field reporting in lots of different conflict zones. And we learn a lot from you as well, and vice versa. So it's you kind of become part of a family that stays on afterwards. It's not a case of you do your fellowship and that's it. You never hear from us again. It's kind of you become part of an alumni network. We're in contact with a lot of people. We do try to get together in person where we possibly can as well. So it really is like it's an amazing opportunity to be part of this kind of network for a year, and you really do like feel a lot of benefits from that. There's also lots of speaking opportunities to talk about your work and the ocean reporting program. So we tend to pop up at journalism and environment conferences. So last year we did the Latin American Investigative Journalism Conference. We're planning a panel at COP. We're at the Global Investigative Journalism Conference. We went to the UN Ocean Reporting, the UN Ocean Conference in Nice. There's always webinars and training opportunities to talk about, and we do offer training to do that as well. You'll also get the chance to work with our amazing engagement team. So this is the team that turns the journalism into kind of concrete outreach opportunities. So, for example, we've had one of our grantees who went to these amazing remote coastal communities in South Africa and did a project about oil and gas and how it was exploration, how it's affecting communities. And one of the outreach things that happened with that was that they took a photo exhibition back to those communities. He talked about his work at a fishing tribunal. We've ended up doing like pop-up things around certain species of fish. So there's a lot of interesting stuff there that you can do with your project as part of that team that will be part of your fellowship. And the last thing is impact. We're already seeing that from the first the first two cohorts of the Ocean Reporting Network that we're seeing people being arrested, we're seeing people being repatriated, we're seeing shipyards being shut down. We can help you enter into awards. So Jenn won awards for the project that she's going to talk about shortly. So there's lots of opportunities that, is more than just being a fellow and having a salary and doing a fun project for a year. So this is what we're really looking for here. And this again is on the website, but just to talk about it in a bit more detail. We really want to see a very clear reporting plan. So we appreciate that when you apply for this, you're already going to have done quite a lot of work to get to the application point. But then that will stand you in good stead if you're successful because you've already done half the work for your project, most of which is planning about it and thinking about what it's going to look like in the real world. And the difference between the fellowships and the grants really is that a fellowship project is something that you follow over the course of a year. It's not just a one-off story, like I want to go here and report on this and that's it. It has to be something that is a number of stories with a coherent theme. So there is a real big difference between that. The level of experience, we're looking for, we've had lots of different levels of experience, very senior journalists, very young journalists. There's no kind of barriers in terms of, I think one of the questions was about, do you have like a minimum age or a maximum age? No. If you have had some experience doing environmental stories, that's amazing. If you come from a financial background and you want to do ocean reporting, that's even better. So there's no one size fits all, but it's not a journalism training program. You do have to be a working journalist to apply for this. And we really want people who will be team players that are open to collaboration and learning. And, this is a full-time commitment as well. So a lot of the questions we get are around like, can I do this part-time? But it really is a big commitment. So you have to be prepared to be open-minded and learn and transparent. So just in terms of sorry, can't see my slide there for my last talking point. What we're really looking for this time is we really want to understand that, especially if you're a freelancer, the newsroom that you're working with understands your project, shares your vision, is going to be able to support you through the course of the year and really give you kind of support throughout the year, not just publish your stories. And that's come from a kind of learning experience with the first two cohorts of the fellows. And there is an FAQ, which I'll share afterwards, which maybe Fernanda will share in the chat, about what that means for a newsroom. If you approach someone and you want them to host you, what does it mean for them? These are some of my top tips, our top tips for a great application. We've kind of talked about them already, but please propose a story. A lot of what we get is, I am in Hawaii and I want to do a project about illegal fishing. That's a topic or some stories from a country that's not an actual concrete story. So it really has to be a clear story. don't tell us 300 words of context, because most of the time we'll probably already know that. Make sure again that your newsroom letter really demonstrates that it's a partnership and they can give you that kind of support throughout the course of the year. And Jen's going to talk a bit about what that means in practice. And really think about, why is it new? Why is it different? Why is it underreported? Why you and why now? One of the kind of things that we like to say about the Ocean Reporting Network is, when it started, I think the initial criteria where you have to have an investigative background and you have to have ocean experience, and there's only a handful of people in the world who have got that. Often with the ocean topics, many of them have never been covered in great detail before, so we're really looking for a combination of in-depth stuff as well as the traditional kind of follow the money, holding people to account investigative stories. Jen's is a good example of something which is a kind of mix of the two. I'd encourage everyone to look at Alexandra Tolte's project from the first cohort about the seaweed industry, because that was a really good example of something that wasn't traditionally investigative but had not been covered in any kind of depth before, and that was a really successful project. Please don't propose something that we've already supported. Look at the last two cohorts, look at what we're looking for, do your pre-reporting. And think about what it's actually going to look like. This is something that comes up in the interview. How many stories are you thinking? How many trips will you need to do? What data and research are you going to need access to? And think about the engagement part as well. If you've got an idea about a project that would lend itself really well to an engagement event or an activity, then tell us about that. And that is one of the questions in the form. So just in terms of the timeline of what happens next, the applications have been open for a couple of weeks. They close on I think it's like 1 minute before midnight on Friday, September the 12th. So there's 2 and a bit more weeks left. Then we'll be reviewing them in September. There'll be interviews in October and offers in November. We're trying to get all of this front loaded before we disappear to COP and GIJC. And then it will actually start in the first weeks of January. And that month will be very much introductory. Then they will move to planning and then starting to reporting. Just in terms of the selection, there's always 2 of us that look at them from very different points of views. We will have calls with the editors in the newsrooms just to make sure that we're all on the same page. And the interviews will likely be myself, Gustavo, who's the head of the Environmental Investigations Unit, someone from DARE and someone from the engagement team, and we'll all ask different questions about your project. So I'm going to hand over to Jenn now just to talk a bit about her experience. Jenn, I can do the slides if you want to shout to me.
Great, fantastic. Thanks for having me. I'm a freelance reporter, and for the Ocean Reporting Network Fellowship, I reported with the Globe and Mail. I'm continuing to round out that coverage. When I did apply, and I think this is helpful context, I had a great rapport with the Globe and Mail. I've been freelancing with various outlets, particularly in Canada, where I'm based, but I'd reported with this outlet and also with a specific editor for 5 years on fisheries, ocean, and climate change. And we had secured an Ocean Reporting Network deep dive grant. Jessica, that's the one you referenced, that we were lucky to win the Environment and Climate Change Award at the Canadian Association of Journalists Awards this year. The project itself, and Jessica, you can give a couple clicks there. I think we'll get some additional.
Yeah, I haven't done the animation thing yet, so let me, I don't know, I might have to hand over to you to do this, because it's when I'm pressing, I'm clicking it, but it's not doing any animation stuff. Oh, there we go. Yeah.
Yahoo!
Okay.
Yes,
I
should have built.
Sorry.
Yeah, try one more time. Try one more time, because there's a couple bullet points there. I was going to say, this is a project where, you were talking about, Jessica, like how frequently things are covered or underreported. I mean, every day there's bylines on examining the plight of the critically endangered North Atlantic right whale. And this particular whale migrates from the US eastern seaboard into Canada and back again. But I think what was really different is that, most of that coverage is reactive. We see an entangled whale, we see a struck whale. We don't necessarily look broadly, and very limited coverage looks across the US-Canada border. So, this is why it fit in that category of transparency and governance and cross-border coverage. So our coverage, I think, differentiates itself because it was aiming to look proactively at all risks and policy measures, including how, at a really interesting time, I mean, when I pitched this project I said Canada and the US are the greatest of allies. Obviously, this past year has been an instrumental shift in that. I would say that in this particular field, there's still a tremendous amount of collaboration that goes on, but it did affect how we cover this particular topic. And you'll see in the application, I mean, of course, you've got a good runway to share your pitch of your project, but also how are you going to do it? And I would say that this is where the Globe and Mail really shined. We have produced 4 stories for so far, plus a timeline of US-Canada policy measures to protect North Atlantic right whales. We've got 3 more coming. Each story has appeared in print, 2 whole print pages. They're all named on the front page. This particular one featured on the front page. We've had digital builds, extensive data visualizations from the team at the Globe and Mail, photography led by Claire Vandermerch, the editor, and Nick Hawkins, Lauren Owens-Lampert, who are 2 freelancers. One of our stories is going to appear in a podcast episode of the Globe's daily news podcast, The Decibel. And we also disseminated through the Globe's climate newsletter. We worked on reels with the Pulitzer Center. So, just to say, I brought a topic that I'd pre-reported. I actually had reported 1 story with the Globe on this in a couple of years previous to the fellowship, but I could not have produced. And if you click to the next slide, Jessica, there's no way I could have done this as a lone freelancer. It was very much a team effort. So here you're seeing some of the print versions that were available. I wanted to reflect just on a couple of my advice, I guess, or experience. I mean, this was definitely the most ambitious undertaking of my reporting career. And I would say that about my deep dive grant project, which published in December as well. But that was matched with also the greatest support that me as a freelancer has ever had to carry out this reporting. That's both in terms of the funding that allowed me to focus this past year to report from where the story is happening. I know across the globe, it's increasingly difficult to report on the ground or on the water. And so we were able to go to Maine and New Brunswick, Rhode Island, Cape Cod, New York City, in addition to those other opportunities that Jessica mentioned, the team support. And I would say that's certainly staff without exception, but fellows too, the ability to form a network with others who are, trying to crack similar nuts, going through similar experience, that was invaluable. And that's a network we'll have for the entirety of our career. And, the support, you go in with a really solid, I mean, it's not just an idea, it's fleshed out, it's your reporting plan. This is how I'm going to map out my entire year. But in those early months, you're getting to know everybody, you're setting up your series, if that's how you're approaching it, you're planning your reporting opportunities, troubleshooting direction, because of course, these plans are always best laid. You've got to be able to iteratively plan. And I think, that was as important for me to be able to do that in my one-on-one meetings with Jessica, in our group meetings with other fellows, with other staff, and certainly with the Globe as well. I would say the Globe's newsroom support was second to none. And they put, the way Ryan McDonald, who's my editor for this project, the senior editor in natural resources, environment, and climate change at the Globe, put it was, when the Globe signs on to a project, they put their backs into it. And I think that they really demonstrated that. Halfway through the project, I did realize it would be helpful to have a consistent backdesk editor that I worked with. And so Sarah Bugden has been working with me on all of the stories and is my kind of day-to-day go-to person. But to be able to have a senior editor, a visuals editor, members of the team who have consistently reported this series with me and really feel, and it is a group project, even though I'm the fellow. Editor guidance from both Jessica, Ryan, Sarah, incredibly important. That made all the difference. And not just on the project. I mean, consider January to March of early this year in Canada. And each of you will have your own country context. I mean, Canada was not particularly concerned about North Atlantic right whales because we had a new neighbor, we had a new prime minister, there was a lot going on. And so even to be able to talk through, how do I make sure that we don't, lose the consistency and support for making sure we get this series in front of readers at a time when they're going to be ready to take it in. The additional opportunities were invaluable as well, I'll say, and I hadn't fully digested that. I thought about, of course, when you're thinking about your pitch, that's what you're focused on in your project, but the ability to go to the UN Ocean Conference, the additional training opportunities to step back and think about your own mental health. And I would say my newsroom did that too. At the end of our fellowship, we hosted a project called Lens on the Water. We brought some of the readers together in a room with award-winning photographers and had a conversation about ocean coverage in Toronto, Canada. That was amazing. My last piece of advice, I would say, is my most important. You'll know, take the time to map out your application, because that maps out your fellowship. I do think having a strong application sets you up for a great year of reporting. I would also say, and this is the gut test, this is the gut register. Try to feel as confident about your host newsroom and the people that you're working with there as you do your project. I think it's important to have a strong project. It's maybe even more important to have a strong team that supports you and make sure that what you've set out to do in, for me, what was the most ambitious year of my reporting career, actually gets done, and in a way that everyone is proud of. And I'm happy to say that, at this stage, that's exactly what happened. So yeah, happy to answer any questions, and thanks again for being here, and just such a privilege to be a part of this network.
Thank you so much to you both. And we have many questions coming in, so let's get started on them. The first one is directed to you, Jessica, and it says, if a team of reporters applies and is successful, do they each receive a salary covered by the fellowship?
I was anticipating these questions. So how we've done it before is there's a couple of different ways. So one person can act as the fellow and then use their reporting expenses to subcontract the other reporters in other countries as part of their projects. Another way that we've done it is two people representing one fellow part-time. That's a little bit more tricky. Everybody would get access to the training, and that is one important thing to mention, which I didn't before, which is if you're a fellow, anyone from your newsroom can come to any of these trainings. And it's because we really do want to sort of build capacity in these areas. So that's worth bearing in mind. I think that's mentioned in that Q&A document about being a host. Well, I think it's the application form is not best set up for lots of people applying. So I would say get one journalist to lead the application and be the point person, because that's how the project will probably have to work as well. And then, if we like the look of the proposal, that's something we can work out in the interviews. And, there is some degree of flexibility with it. So there's a couple of different ways we can do it.
Nice. Next question is coming from Allison, and they're asking, if a team of reporters apply, can they be from the same publication or must they be from different publications?
I guess that would depend. If it was someone like a journalist and a videographer and a photo person and a data person, then yes, one person would have to be the fellow. We don't sort of give money to a newsroom to do an ocean project over the course of the year, because it has to be a fellowship that's going to sort of develop one person's particular skills in that area.
And just to add to this one, you do have to have like a main publication, like committed editors that will edit your material, be responsible for your series, keep track of your project, report with us. So there has to be like a mother publication responsible for the project.
Yeah, and a couple of people have asked, can I have multiple outlets? You can, but there has to be one newsroom, which is responsible for all the stuff that Fernanda just said, but also for safety in the field as well. We can't take responsibility for that. So we need to know that the newsroom who's responsible for that fellow has that, is managing that responsibility. So that's why that partnership is really so important.
Great. The next one is coming from Alice, and she's asking, is there a specific number of stories to publish during the fellowship or a publication schedule that we must follow throughout the year?
Good question. So we did a lot of work after the first cohort because the first cohort was very much a learning experience, and we had people publishing a year after the fellowship ended. With the second one, as Jenn will probably hopefully attest to, it was a lot more focused. So usually, as Jenn said, the first month is kind of getting to know each other, figuring out your project, then planning your reporting, and then we want all the kind of the field reporting and the spending of the expenses to happen between the third and the ninth month. Something, a concrete thing, or most of the reporting has to have been done, and something has to be published by the 10th month of the fellowship. And that's really because we want to still be able to support you and engage with you while you're a fellow, not afterwards when we've had to move on to other things. If things are published at the end of your fellowship, I think Jenn's still got 2 more stories to go. That's absolutely fine, but the bulk of the work has to be done within the fellowship. What was the first part of the question, Fernanda? About the minimum and maximum. No, but we will ask you in the interview, what's the minimum, what's the maximum? And when we're planning out the reporting project at the beginning of the fellowship, that's something we really want to think about to make sure that's concrete. We also accept that that's going to change over time. So I think Jenn maybe started with 3 or 4 and has ended up with like 7 or 8.
Yeah, I was
Stories.
going to say we pitched 6, and this actually addresses a question too later on about how much detail, because we gave this is the overall story and why this coverage is different. Every day there's bylines about right whales, but it's not proactive. It doesn't look across borders. It's not transparency and governance. So we kind of said what differentiates the reporting. But we did commit to, I look back, 6 stories. So, and we'll wind up with 7 or 8, depending how you count, because we did that separate policy timeline. But I think for me, the importance there is, not surprising your newsroom that you signed up to do 3 and actually you need more like 6,
Yeah.
right? Something like that.
Some of those that came out were actually part of the fellowship. Was Jenn got the opportunity to go to like the biodiversity COP and the UN Ocean Conference, where you did news stories from the event. And I think it was same with Alec Lund as well. He went to COP, he got a couple of stories from COP. So shorter news stories will come out as part of the fellowship that are added extras, but we don't want it to be like a year of beat reporting those news stories. So I think it's a good idea to have an idea of how many. If it's very data heavy, I think probably 2 is realistic. If it's something more like Jenn's project, I'd say 5 or 6, but we will help you work out what is reasonable and what is achievable. And, if it's very unrealistic, we will say. So it's a kind of, it's something that we work out together, but it's good to have an idea at the beginning. Just to mention as well about that flexibility within the first cohort. Somebody got laid off halfway through. Another person lost their kind of 3 successive editors in their newsroom and had to really change the course of their project. So these are all things that we sort of establish at the beginning, but as long as we talk regularly, you can change course with stuff, and there is a lot of flexibility. So as long as we're having conversations about that, then that's the kind of approach to have.
Nice. Yvonne, I think your question has been answered, but please do say in the chat if you feel it has not. The next question is, for the application, is it expected to provide detailed descriptions of the stories to be produced, or would a general vision of the project be sufficient?
I think a general vision, and then if you've got an idea of concrete stories that would kind of make up that overall vision, then provide us with those, because it shows that you've really thought about what it's going to look like, in as a finished product. And that's something that we've sort of asked at interview, what would this look like? Would it be like a short documentary and 3 data stories, or so yeah, if you have that level of detail, then by all means, I know there's not a massive word count box, but do put that in, because it shows that you've really developed this and you have a clear idea of it.
Yes, I would like to stress that last point, Jessica, because when we're reading reviews and we see that you want to look into a certain company that does fishing, but we see that you already looked into what their partners are, how much volume they trade, who they're trading with, where it goes to. This gives us a lot of basically hope that you're on this beat and that you've been following this and that you can follow it further. So if you can share those details, it really helps your application a lot.
Yeah, I mean, it's really the opportunity, which is extremely rare in journalism, to get the chance to really go deep for a whole year and to have the time to look into all of these rabbit holes of company reports or supply chains. No one really has the luxury of time anymore. So the deeper you can go that's away from the usual type of reporting that you'd be doing is better.
Great. The next question says, if I am currently based in Europe, but my reporting focuses on Latin America, would I still be eligible to apply under Global South category?
So based in Europe, but reporting on Latin America because you are Latin American. I don't know. I'm never really sure whether I think we count it of the nationality of the journalist rather than where you will be doing the reporting. Yeah. So it depends.
Nice. The next question is asking if Pakistani applicants are eligible, and yes, you are. Everybody from all over the world.
Well, actually, we do get a lot of applications from Pakistan and some parts of Africa as well, which are proposing freshwater fisheries projects. So just to be really clear, this has to be salty water, not freshwater, even though that's like a really, there's so many interesting projects and stories, but just bear that in mind just in case.
That's a great point. The next question is, how do collaborations work? Do I form a transnational collaboration before applying, or do I find contributors from other countries once my project is selected?
That's another very good question. So if you can bear with my long-winded explanations, I can tell you how it works. So sometimes we will help you match with another journalist. So last time we had a really good Italian reporter based in Spain who wanted to do something tracing octopus products back from Mexico. Somebody else applied from Mexico who had a really good idea, but it wasn't quite the right fit. And so we ended up pairing them up together. And that counted as a cross-border collaboration. Another fellow originally proposed something with, he would report from Sri Lanka with a reporter from India via a UK newsroom. The Indian journalist fell through, so we found other partners for him to work with. So I think if you're applying and I don't know, say you're in, there's an example, Indonesia, and you want to look at like shrimp farming that is, you suspect it's illegal and it's going to America. If you want to team up with a journalist in an American newsroom and you can trace that whole supply chain, then come to us with that proposal and that would be great. If you can't find anyone, apply anyway, and it may be that we've had an applicant from America that doesn't have anyone at the other end. So I think if you've already got those connections, it's great. But if not, and you feel like it's a very strong idea, then you should still apply and we can try to probably match people.
Nice. Next question is coming from Daniela, and she's asking, how detailed does the publication and distribution plan have to be? Which audiences I want to reach and how I will engage them?
Okay, so the letter, I think early on, we just wanted to know that, there was a newsroom that said we will publish this fellow's work and support them. But we really want to know now that the newsroom will give the level of engagement and kind of support that they gave to Jenn. So we want to know that they really understand what your project is about. So if they can describe it in their own words, which kind of shows that they understand, we want to know whether they will have the support of the data team or the audience engagement team or the social media person at that newsroom. We want to know that there will be an editor that will edit their work over the course of the year, that will take responsibility for the safety in the field, and any kind of added extras that they see the value of ocean reporting, they see the value of the topic that you're proposing and being part of that network. So if they can show some level of understanding of what it is we're trying to do, then that would be great. Fernanda, would you like to answer the last part of that about the audience engagement?
Sure. I think that with the audience engagement, it's kind of a question to see how you as reporters know about the audience that your reporting is going to reach. So if you know the spaces that they use, if you know the platforms that they use, if you know how to communicate with them and what is the best way, right? Because that will also guide how your reporting is structured. Because, for example, let's say you want to communicate with an audience that is mainly on WhatsApp and loves to consume videos. That will guide your reporting efforts. So it's not something that we say, no, you committed to a certain audience here in your pitch, it has to be this. But it's more that we see that you thought of how your reporting will reach people, of how they will, interact with it, use it. That's the invitation that we make in the proposal.
And that's something we learn a lot from as well. Like we've worked with lots of different grantees in India where we know that YouTube is really important. We've worked with like outlets in Latin America where we know that it's like WhatsApp networks or photography, or in Africa, it's like PDF newsletters. So that's something that like we learn from as well, and informs the way that we support the journalism. So we just want to know that we've thought about who you're trying to reach with your reporting. It doesn't have to be, yeah, it's not fixed for the whole term of the fellowship.
Next question coming from Rachel. What if we don't have newsroom support right now as a freelancer? Do you need commitment of support from the newsroom by the time of application? And how do you go about finding a home for your stories?
Yeah, you do. Unfortunately, we've had people apply before and they haven't had the letter of support. And, we can do a sort of courtesy, please, can you get the letter within 24 hours? But if you don't have an outlet that you've agreed to work with, then we can't take your application forward. I mean, thinking about the newsrooms, it depends if it's someone that you've worked with before that you think is going to give you a good level of support and involvement. It's going back to what Fernanda said about thinking which type of audience. If you, yeah, I don't want to volunteer to to suggest lots of different outlets, but you could have a look at the grant and fellowship pages on our website, and you could look at the type of outlets that we've worked with before. That might give you some sort of a steer. Do you have any advice, Jenn, for that one? Like about finding the right newsroom fit? How did you go about?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I mean, there have been, I'd gotten to a place in my career where I was, reporting with several outlets pretty consistently. But for me, I think I could see that the focus of this was a real fit for the Globe and Mail. And also just in terms of I could envision what it would look like. The other factor is I had produced a two-page print story that had an online digital build on North Atlantic right whale protections with the Globe. And so I knew we'd be picking up with a team where we left off. So it was those factors. Now, could another outlet have done an excellent job? Perhaps, but I knew I had this built relationship and that we would be, continuing something good we started. And even when we did that coverage and felt really good about it, we knew it was much deeper. Like that coverage really didn't cover the US context as an example.
Yeah, I think fishing around to try to find an outlet to work with is going to be a challenge. I think it has to be someone that you've worked with consistently and you have a relationship with, that you can approach them. But yeah, I mean, a lot of people in previous application rounds have put in an application and said the letter's coming, but we don't have the capacity to wait for that. It's been open for 6 weeks and we've tried to keep it open for a lot longer and give people as much lead in time as possible. But we will have hundreds of applications. So if you don't have a letter, I'm afraid it's not going to go any further.
Next question coming from Vlujan is it okay to work with a small local newsroom, or does it have to be a big one?
No, if your project is very local and you have some interesting distribution model, or it's something which is only happening in that area, it absolutely doesn't have to be a big international outlet. So I'm just trying to think of among the cohorts. Among the first cohort, we had smaller newsrooms. We had a smaller newsroom in Indonesia. We had a smaller Middle Eastern newsroom. We've had the New York Times, Scientific American. We've had the Globe and Mail. So we have had bigger outlets, but that's absolutely not. We need to have a mix every time of big and small. So if you have a good relationship with them, if you have a good topic idea, if it's something very local that can be told in like a new and different way, then absolutely, it's not a barrier at all.
Lucian, I just wanted to pick up on your question too and talk about the clips, because sometimes journalists tell us like, where do I need to have published before applying? And really, we go over each one of your clips, and it's really your reporting that speaks out. It doesn't matter where it's published. It can be published on Medium, on Substack, as long as we see that it's good, deep, relevant reporting, it's all good. So yes, please put in the clips that show the best that you can do.
Mm. So Fernanda's just been looking through hundreds of AI fellowship applications. Is there anything that, like, other than our top tips, is there anything extra that you've picked up on or you would advise just from being so closely involved with that recently?
Definitely, but I do think it speaks a lot to my previous point of when we're reading the application that we see that you know the story, like that you have pre-reported on it, you know what are the consequences, you know the stakeholders involved, you know maybe the consequences on a political agenda or in an economic field, like you know why this is relevant and you show us why. And I think that's the main takeaway. But also to this previous point of that we see your previous reporting, how you write, how you approach topics, if you're more into visuals, more into data, that we get a sense of who you are as a journalist. That is also very important.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, the questions are coming. We have 28. Next question from Yvonne is saying, is there a possibility of extending or renewing the fellowship for longer term investigations if the initial reporting shows potential for deeper impact?
Yes, I think Fernanda, you might be able to. This has happened once within the Rainforest Investigations Network, right? So as I understand it, maybe you can share your perspective. Is it has to be? Does it? I'm always confused as to whether it's an extension of what you've done or it has to be very markedly different from what you did as your first project. So we haven't had it before in ORN, so I'm never really sure what the kind of criteria is.
Yeah, there is. I think it's pretty flexible, basically. It could be a continuation of your previous project, or it could be something else. But the thing is, it needs to be amazing. It needs to be the best pitch ever, and with a very clear reporting methodology, with a very clear impact vision of why you would be extending this fellowship as well. So it's, yeah, a bit trickier, but possible.
Yeah, I mean, we had to say no to someone who wanted to extend from the first cohort, and that was a very hard decision, but we're just trying to give as many people as possible the opportunity. So, yeah, it would have to be like blowing our minds good to kind of take a place that could be offered to someone who hasn't had that opportunity before.
Next question coming from Julian. Can a single outlet support more than one candidate?
No, actually, that's a very good point to mention. So last time, I think in the applications we had, and we maybe should have communicated this with some of the newsrooms, we had one newsroom supporting 5 fellowship applications, and that is just not going to be possible in reality. So I think we would maybe benefit from talking to newsrooms and just say, look, you need to pick the best candidate to put forward and tell us who you think it is, because in reality, no one's going to have the resources to support that many people. So no, I think it's the onus is a bit on the newsrooms to be picking who they think that they would support and work with over the course of the year as well.
Yes. Julian, just a continuation of your question that you asked if fish farms are considered a valid topic. Yes, they are.
For sure.
Next question. Is there a webinar planned for the Ocean and Fisheries Grant anytime soon?
No, but we could do one. We're always open to suggestions. I think it's very clear now what the kind of distinction between a good grant project and a fellowship project is. And I think with the last 2 cohorts of applications, there's been some fellowship applications that we've sort of said, this isn't going to work as a fellowship, but you could apply as a grant, and that has kind of worked out in one or two situations. So I think that happened with Jenn's first application, if that's okay to say, Jenn, that you applied for the Unsettled as a fellowship idea, and it wasn't quite the right fit, and you did it as a grant, and that worked really well because it was shorter and more contained. So no, we could do, and we've also talked about maybe doing one of these for newsrooms and editors as well, for them to ask about being part of the fellowship or supporting grant applications. So that's something we're thinking of as well.
And that's a great hook for our next question, coming from Katarina, that they're asking, what does the letter from the newsroom need to include?
Okay, so I think I've said this already, so let me try and maybe I should write this down somewhere, but it needs to show that they understand the project. So I want to hear in the editor's words what they see the project as being, not like you've written something and given it to them to sign. I want to see more than just a commitment to just publish the articles. I want to know what the level of kind of in-house capacity is that they can provide. So data, visuals, social media engagement. We have a dedicated editor. I want to know that they understand that they need to be responsible for your safety, and that they will have regular kind of check-ins, and there's timelines that will be agreed with us. And there is a contract. The newsrooms have to sign a contract as well, and they do have to agree to stick to the timelines that we've laid out. So what I talked about the reporting has to be done between like month 3 and month 9. All the money has to be spent. One thing has to be published before the 10th month. We had one newsroom with this cohort where they didn't do that, and we withheld the rest of the money until they did publish something. So we do have pretty strict contracts that the newsrooms have to sign as well. And in order to sign that, they need to really understand what it entails to support a fellow.
Nice. The next one is saying if we could give a ballpark of the reporting budget. I think we covered this a little bit, but basically we will agree on what will be the reporter's salary, and outside of that salary, which will be paid monthly, there will also be a reporting expenses. And let's say you need to hire a data consultant to help you go over a lot of spreadsheets. Then you have designated money to hire this person that will be helping for your project, or you need to you're going to publish a landing page for a special project. You need to buy the domain. So there's a bucket of money that, depending on, it's not unlimited, but it is a bucket of money that will help make your project happen.
Yeah. So we will kind of agree, like towards the end of the year, look at the budgets for next year, and depending on which fellows we have, but it's between like $7,000 and $9,000. And all of the salaries will be like, they're internationally benchmarked. They're very competitive, I like to think. And it does depend on kind of where you're based and the level of experience. And with all of the kind of the expenses, we will ask that you send us receipts. There's very clear procedures that we need to follow there to make sure that we're accountable for everything.
Yep.
But actually, one more, Jenn, you got like 3 or 4 reporting trips with yours, didn't you? And it was, even reporting where you were, where it was pretty expensive, you got quite a lot of reporting mileage out of that budget.
Yeah, I mean, it really made us think about how, where we really needed to be. And so I wouldn't say normally I would suggest going to a conference, but it happened to be that at the beginning of the fellowship, there was a conference where all of the North Atlantic Right Whale researchers and many of the people in the policy environment were going to be together. So it was like, okay, let's do that, but short, keep it short. And then otherwise, just trying to jam in. Like the week that we were in Cape Cod, we met with, 4 different research teams deploying buoys and gliders and deploying on-demand fishing gear. Like we really just tried to stack as much in as we could to get the most out of. And we also called in favors. Like we called in favors to be able to get great shots from the skyline in New York of shipping lanes. So, but I think that people see the work that the Pulitzer Center's Ocean Reporting Network are doing, and it's why, early on, even though we had great plans, we still had to secure everything to make that happen. And I would say it really took me to January to like flesh out those remaining trips. But yeah, it was totally enough.
And again, that's why it's important that you do have a good newsroom to support you, because Jenn was able to get all of that stuff from them in-house. Whereas if you're a freelancer and it's a smaller newsroom and they don't have those staff, you're going to have to pay for that out of your reporting expenses, which is not really what we want. So
Exactly.
again, the newsroom comes into it in a big way.
Yeah. We have a question. What share does the MENA region have in the applications, and is geographical distribution taken into account while selecting?
Yeah, with the first cohort, I think we sort of, it was like a geographical spread of, not like in a tick box way, but we wanted to make sure that there was equal representation. With the second cohort, it was much more kind of, North America, Europe, with some other people based in different places. I mean, one of our first fellows was from Egypt, and we were really excited because she had an amazing data project. We'd never really had anyone from that region before, let alone doing ocean reporting. So we've also got a grantee who's doing a project in Yemen at the moment, which is very interesting. So we do look to tell stories from places that are not traditionally represented, or you wouldn't normally hear those stories. So yeah, we wouldn't just have 10 people from Europe. Like, we need to have it evenly distributed. And countries like Peru and Indonesia, which are really big sort of fishing bodies, we would definitely look to have like representation from key jurisdictions as well.
Another question coming from Katarina. I am a radio journalist. Am I eligible?
Yes, yes. And again, with the regions, we want to have a balance of different mediums as well. We haven't had any radio, we haven't had any podcasts for the fellowship yet. We've had sort of podcasts as an added extra after the reporting, but we haven't had any documentary filmmakers. We have had supported those as grant projects, but we haven't had those as part of a fellowship. And a lot of people ask about photographers as well. Yes, it is open to photographers. It will be a bit more of a challenge thinking about how to present it and who would write words to go with the photos, but it is open to all formats.
Great. Another question is asking, are the funds managed by the media outlet or directly by the reporter?
We can have that conversation at the beginning. Sometimes the newsroom does choose to like put the money through them and to the fellow just for like accounting or bureaucracy purposes. In some cases, I think, Jenn, you managed your pot entirely by yourself. So we would decide that in the conversations at the beginning. If you're offered a fellowship, we will then have a conversation with the newsroom and work out those details. And often
yeah,
sorry.
In my case, sorry, I mean, Pulitzer managed the funds, but what we did was we agreed that any reporting trip I would go on, we vetted it by, of course, you, Jessica, and then also my senior editor as well, in addition to any other, expenses. So even though, they didn't hold the funds, they still had responsibility for saying, yeah, this is a good use of the reporting funds.
Yeah, and there's really clear policies and procedures around how we manage all of the money and what we ask for, and getting money to places which are difficult to wire money to, or working in areas where you don't get receipts that you could come back and claim for. So we have all that covered.
Nice. I'm jumping now to the questions that are in the chat. And Badan is asking, I work as an editor in a quite big newsroom and I do field reporting as well. Am I eligible for this fellowship?
Yeah, it provided you can produce the work. We wouldn't just have like a fellowship for an editor who is editing ocean stories. You would have to like be proposing and producing actual outputs. But yeah, it doesn't, there's no, level of seniority cap or baseline that we would sort of exclude people from.
Okay. I did miss one from the Q&A button that said, do you fund reporters to report on stories not in their countries of residence?
Yes, yeah, yes. I mean, yeah, we would have to look at how it worked in principle, but we had an Italian fellow who was living in Spain and reporting in Spain, and there's probably other examples. So yes, that wouldn't be a problem.
Monowada is asking, is it possible to make a comparative investigation report between two continents?
It would depend what the topic was on. I mean, that sounds quite broad. If there was specific, like issues that you managed to drill down to, then that sounds like an interesting idea.
I also missed one from Jonathan that is saying if we're interested in stories that might work as a Netflix series or an indie doc, what importance do we place on stories that have the potential to be chosen for a larger outside production?
I mean, I haven't worked a lot with that, and we do get some grant applications for those types of things, but they're very expensive, so I don't know how that would fit in a fellowship in terms of the money. But yeah, I mean, if you wanted to spend a whole year making a short documentary about fishmeal factories or something, then you know, if you need a whole year to do that, and it's within the budget, then yes.
Nice. I see that somebody just sent another question saying, what is the difference between a freelance journalist and a staff journalist? So a staff journalist is somebody already employed by a newsroom. And a freelance journalist is somebody that pitches stories to multiple newsrooms that doesn't have that direct connection to the newsroom.
Sometimes where it's worked with the fellows before is that a newsroom, if their staffer has got a fellowship, they've used that fellowship salary to hire someone else to replace that staffer for the course of the year, because you don't want to lose, like, you know, personnel. And oh, what's I going to say with the freelance? No, it's gone out of my head. No, it's gone. It'll come to me. Oh yeah. The kind of trade-off with the freelancers is that it must be hard because for a whole year you'll have to say no to other things. So think about that. And also a lot of people have asked about percentages of time, like can I do other projects while I'm doing this? It is meant to be full time. If you are freelance and you've got other things that you're finishing off at the start of this, that's fine, as long as it doesn't impact the work that you're producing for us. But we can't have people like taking on a fellowship and continuing to do like their full-time job.
Perfect. I think we have covered all of the questions, but it's amazing. Yes, unless I've missed something, so please let me know in the chat if I have. What about a PhD student?
I mean, it's yes, if you've got an outlet that will publish your articles, but it's not meant to support academic work.
Yes, and again, right, the fellowship is designed for professional journalists that
Yeah.
are working with journalism. Are the storylines limited to strictly oceans, or does the ORN accept story pitches as long as the issues involves waters? So Jessica covered this a bit before. It needs to be salty waters.
Yeah. You can, if it's a grant application, then we do have, as well as ocean reporting grants, there's global reporting grants that you can apply for. So if you have an amazing freshwater idea that would work well for a grant, then you can apply through our grant process, but we don't have fellowships that cover freshwater ecosystems at the moment. Although it is it is something we keep saying that we'll do something about.
Yes. And Almas, we have covered this too. It's really hard for us to give you a figure because it depends on the region of the world, reporting experience. There's so many factors into play for this question, but it is basically what your current media outlet gives in salary and then additional reporting expenses. The webinar will be shared to everybody that registered. It will be up on YouTube, and I will let everybody know once it's up. And I think we have covered them. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Fernanda, and thank you to Jenn as well, because I think that's really good to like have my perspective and your perspective from what it was like to be part of the cohort. But yeah, thank you for all your questions, and we've got you've got a couple of weeks yet. I think there is an email address on the website if you do have any burning questions that weren't covered. But yeah, good luck, and look forward to seeing all the applications.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Everyone, bye.